Brian, I just heard from Leo via text and he said he's joining through his phone. I
Okay.
don't see him
I
on the
just
call
saw
yet.
Bryn Kenny for a minute, and I wondered if that was him, but I just texted Leo again. We'll give him a couple more minutes.
Brian, just so you know, your voice seems quite quiet, at least compared to Meredith. So,
Huh. Is my voice still quiet?
No, it sounds normal to me.
Okay.
It's better now, but it's kind of the same thing that happened the other day at, I don't know if it was policy subcommittee, and that seemed to fix itself about halfway through. So
I mean, I can hear you and understand you. It's just not loud.
Don't want to make anybody have to concentrate to hear me. Is that better?
that's much better.
That's better.
Okay. Just turn the volume to the max and not let Zoom adjust it. See if that works. If I'm too loud, tell me.
I think that's how you make people focus on what you're saying, right? You're supposed to talk in a softer voice, so everybody.
Oh, I had an English teacher who was a master at that. He whispered for 40 straight minutes, and the entire class of high school students sat on the edge of their seats, leaning forward, trying to hear him. There's Leo, it looks like. Let's see. Somebody who came in as Orono citizen can't hear sound, but I'm going to guess that we just weren't talking. Are you aboard, Leo?
Can you hear me?
It's a little laggy, but
Hey.
yes, we can.
All right, sorry. I'm gonna try and get better, but I'm here. I can hear you.
All right, go ahead and call the meeting to order. Start with a pledge of allegiance. I don't know that we have a flag anywhere, or Richard's got his.
I've got one right here. Look at that.
Oh, and Meredith's got one too. There we go. People come prepared. In the attic, I can't stand up, but I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So agenda adjustments, it's probably more of just agenda clarification, but we can vote on it if you want. When we get to the policies, the original one that went out had a revision for DJR. That's not happening. The current version says EFA purchasing. That's also not going to be treated as a revision. EFA is listed under first reads. We will address it under EFA. So people want me to make a formal motion to drop the revision of DJR? Are we okay with just skipping that? Mark says okay with just skipping that.
Okay, we're skipping. Can you hear me any better now or no?
That is better, Leo, yes.
Okay.
All right, so we won't formally adjust that, but just so everybody's tipped, that's what's going to happen in the policies. Okay, we don't have any minutes to address. We met last week, so a lot of these things have been taken care of or cleared off. We don't have any warrants to address this week, so we're right into public comment. So I would like to open the floor for public comment. If anybody would like to speak, just go ahead and take yourself off mute and introduce yourself and start speaking.
I feel like Brian missed me last week, so I can speak this week. I'm going to turn on my video here. I just wanted to say that having read the plan for the elementary school, if our district goes to yellow, it seems like kind of an underwhelming response compared to the spike in cases that is causing it, because essentially it would have 20 less third graders in the building. And other than that, I can see no difference to what we're doing now. So I know it's a hard problem with what to do with young children, and there's a lot of complications, but really I feel like if we reach the point where our county is rated yellow, that it calls for some kind of bigger response that is more than just involving like 15 or 20 kids. And I also, and I feel like a lot of parents of middle schoolers and high schoolers, you know, with the whole COVID case, over the weekend are feeling concerned. And one of my big concerns is contact tracing and how well we're actually able to do it, because my daughter's bus route was actually involved. And there was at least one child that we knew of who actually went to school. I don't know if they weren't contacted. Her parents seemed totally surprised that this, you know, would be somewhere, you know, a concern. And then my child, who was not on the bus that whole week, was then pulled aside at school to go home. And what I got out of that is that nobody actually knew who was on the bus. And that was kind of a concerning way to feel. So just, we have these measures to keep us safe. We haven't really had to try them a lot yet. And I think we're finding that maybe as they become tried, there might be some glitches. So, I mean, there's just a lot of parental concern out there. And I think we talked a lot about mental health, sorry to be going on, but an important thing too is the mental health of these kids who are constantly or potentially going to be told they are exposed or might have been exposed, especially for older kids who realize the implications of what that may be for themselves and their whole family. Like that's another aspect of mental health to consider as you decide, things like, who to have in the building and whether we should move towards hybrid or a closure. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks.
Thank you for the feedback. Any other public comment? Give it one more chance here. Last call for public comment.
There's somebody
Okay.
commenting in the chat. Would that person be able to comment to the video, which I think is the approved way?
Yeah, so officially that you're welcome to use the chat, but it has no official standing and the board members oftentimes don't, much as they might like to have a chance to read the chat. So if anybody
He said
wants,
he doesn't have a microphone.
okay. I will
Want me to
just,
read it? Do you want it to just go unnoticed?
well, we'll notice. I'll just point all the board members that there is a
Okay.
public comment in the chat.
Just throwing it out there. Wanted
Yep.
him to be heard too.
Yep. No, we want to hear from everybody. We do try and read the chat as much as we can. So another comment duly noted and appreciated. Any other public comment? Okay. Don't see any
Hey,
more.
Brian, maybe just a reminder that public comment is just that, public comment. It's not a question and answer. So it kind of feels like that was a question posed, just to understand that we don't typically, maybe to reiterate that wouldn't be bad.
Yeah, fair point. It is.
I guess I just did.
Yep, you did. Perfect. Yeah, we're happy to take comments, individually to administrators or board members through email or phone. But yeah, at this point in time, it's just comment. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to acknowledgements. We did not do that last week, so I think we should do acknowledgements. Aaron, you want to start?
I would like to acknowledge all the staff and teachers at ASA who are kind of having to pull off the craft fair on their own, and Stacy Newman who did all the work, get it all set up. I got some gifts under the tree already, so I'm excited.
Great. Jake?
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
Leo?
Nothing at this time. They are asking if someone could read that. I can't get at those chats. Sorry, not too versatile on the mobile here, but someone did ask about reading the chat.
I'm happy to read it if they really can't present it. Why did Orno, but there's not a matter of public record that's different. But both the chat, for the record, the chatting and the speech get mentioned, get recorded in the same way in the minutes and everything else. But why did Orno decide to wait until now to speak on the COVID situation, especially considering UMaine is already remote? Is RSU waiting until a death to occur for them to move to remote? Also, why isn't contact tracing being done for secondary contacts, especially given how bad the history of secondary contact cases can be in Maine with the wedding retirement home case? Thank you for the comment. Okay. We're moving through acknowledgements. Mark.
I've got nothing at this time.
Okay. And I just, I know we've said these acknowledgements, but in many ways, as a teacher myself, as the semester drags on, I appreciate that semester is dragging on, and that I'm sure it's been an exhausting fall for everybody involved, students and teachers. And I appreciate everybody hanging in there. And I know as the COVID cases start to arise, the workload for the administrators has only gotten that much higher as well too. So I just want to appreciate, it's not perfect. It's way less than what everyone would like to be doing, but I think Orno is doing a great job, and I'm deeply appreciative of everybody who's making that happen, ranging from students to teachers to staff to administrators. So nothing's changed on that front, but I do think it's important to keep that acknowledged at the front of our minds as we move forward. It's been a lot of extra work this year, and many things have been much harder, and I appreciate what everybody's doing. Meredith, anything you want to add?
Yes, I have several I wanted to mention. This is our last meeting for this month, so I just wanted to acknowledge a lot of the outreach efforts that are being organized by different groups around the schools right now. We have the JMG group and the counseling group at the high school, all the schools actually work together to provide gifts and such to families during this time of year, as well as food. And so they're finding ways to navigate that amidst these, very different circumstances. The Key Club recently was doing a drive. The student councils at all 3 schools are doing different kinds of drives for either food or other goods, toiletries, such. So want to acknowledge all of our student groups who are really finding ways to continue their outreach to the community. Also want to acknowledge the OMS drama group. They had a virtual performance last Friday night, and want to thank them for persevering as well through this, and their director, Rachel Sear, who's got the graphic there from the performance on her screen tonight. So congratulations to all of those performers. Also want to recognize, I think everyone has heard about the just massive kind of undertaking the CRF funds have been to take advantage of that great resource that we were provided. And so it's resulted in kind of a lot of extra supplies, equipment coming into the schools. And as we kind of close in on that deadline, things are really coming at a fast rate. So just want to acknowledge a group of a lot of individuals, in particular, recently, Brent Fournier and the whole custodial team had a lot of kind of receiving and distributing to do recently, as well as Jason Burgess, Melissa Barton, Meredith Diamond, all the tech leads across the schools have been pitching in with a lot of tech items. So I want to thank all of those groups for kind of the massive undertaking that I've seen. I know there's been other ordering happening at each of the schools. The principals are involved with that, their admin assistants. And so it's just been, again, a great resource to have, but no small undertaking to have all this come so quickly. So thank all of those people. Also, I want to just acknowledge the town of Orono reached out to me, town manager Sophie Wilson and Chief Lowe, who is the fire chief, but also the head of emergency management for Orono, to just extend kind of support and dialogue during this time. They were involved in our process this summer around our reopening committee, and we've re-engaged, and they've offered some shared resource support as we need that. So just thank them for, I know they have a lot on their plate, but to offer some support as we need that is much appreciated. So I think those are all my acknowledgements for tonight.
Great, thanks. We'll move on to reports. So we'll start with director reports. And Lisa, you want to go first?
Sure. First one is on nursing. Karen Martin is just been amazing, staying on top of suspected COVID reports. She's communicating with families and staff, following up with contract tracing requirements. Just amazing effort. She's working into the evening. She's working on weekends. We're also grateful for the support that she has with Heather James this year, meeting the needs of our kids. She's doing a great job. As far as ELL, the WIDA Access Proficiency Test, the window has been extended because testing is supposed to be done in person. I'm not sure how that will be accomplished this year. It's been extended to January 11th to April 16th. Recently, we lost 3 ed techs, and we're working very hard to replace these employees. It hasn't been easy, and also with the COVID positive case that we've been dealing with this week, we've got 3 more ed techs in quarantine. So just the efforts of staff being willing to lend out, support people, and help cover each other's needs and student needs is just been amazing to watch, and not at all surprising given the staff, but they're working very hard. A local entitlement update. Our end of year report for school year 1920 was submitted and approved. We also have projected allocations for next year. There's an increase to the tune of about $40,000. The total allocation is projected to be $2,472,876. We're also working on our special education audit. It's kind of in full swing as far as our desk audit and reporting of that information. That's all due the end of January. So a lot of work tallying up that information is happening right now in our office. We also received word that the opioid litigation that we were informed of earlier in the year, and we decided to attach our name to. We received word that the opioid litigation reached a settlement, and we've been asked to submit some information related to specific costs to the district, and that information will be used to determine how our district will be compensated. So that's it on my end, if there are any questions.
Great. Any questions? Thank you. And next up is Meredith Diamond, curriculum coordinator.
Thank you, Brian. Hi, everybody. I am really happy to just kind of jump on to start the point that Meredith was making about the lift of new technology in the district recently, but yesterday in particular, we took delivery off of a huge tractor trailer of 37 75-inch interactive displays that are being distributed around the district. And until yesterday, I had no idea what it meant to receive 37 of these devices and move them around a district. But with the help of all of the folks that that Meredith has mentioned, that deployment is underway. We've had a team of kids in the library with the help of Emily Jackson Sanborn and Melissa Barton and Jason Burgess putting together the carts that these displays go on, and trying to basically get them up and running as soon as possible. And that has the potential to really change the course of things. I should also give a shout out to Graham, who was there to the late hours tonight helping put those carts together. But all of this, the other side of this deployment of all of this new hardware is teachers who are doing their best with what they have under these incredible circumstances, now having, this potentially magical new device in their hands that could add significantly to what is happening, but it's going to require a lift of learning and practice and acclimation. And so I just want to acknowledge that as well, that, while we have this boon of new technologies, I also think it's worth acknowledging the teachers who are being patient with us and showing up at their doors with these things to deliver, but also patient with us as we get these things into their hands and then develop the training that will be necessary to use them to maximum impact. So that is a project that the tech committee has undertaken and is working on, and that is going to be an ongoing project that hopefully will leave us with positive ripples, not just now, but in years to come. Another element that I would like to highlight is the ongoing work of the Anti-Racism and Equity in Education team. We have our final 2 sessions of our book talk for STAMP scheduled for January. This team has been, thinking through the logistics and the impacts of this book talk, but they've also been thinking about what comes next and how do we take the next steps here in RSU 26 toward true equity and inclusivity in our classrooms, in our school cultures, and in our curricula. So that that conversation is ongoing, and I look forward to the turn that group takes next. tomorrow, the Maine Curriculum Leaders Association is going to be meeting with the commissioner and the assistant commissioner to talk about the evolution of assessment statewide. We have heard that for sure we are not doing the Empower assessments in the spring. We are still waiting for word about both the short-term and the long-term changes that will be made in the state in an effort to bring assessment up to that point of being a truly impactful and instructive data point that schools and teachers can use in real time, as opposed to having data lag year to year. So I anticipate in future meetings being able to update everyone on what specifically those evolutions will look like, both in the short term and the long term. But in the meantime, building principals have been working hard with the tech leads in their buildings to administer our fall NUIA assessments that got started just today here in OMS. Richard reported that things went really well, and I think that that is due to a lot of preparation and forward thinking on behalf of his team and his teachers. So thank you, Richard, for getting us started. And before the break, I anticipate that we will have full NUIA administration in grades 2 to 9 throughout the district. The last piece I'd like to highlight for today is our ongoing study of the distance learning playbook. So we're going to be wrapping up the teacher edition of our distance learning playbook book study next week. We've had solid participation across the district, and it's been a great chance to have dialogue across grade levels, across departments. Right now, in the works is a distance learning playbook book study for parents in the district. We have used CRF2 funds to purchase 100 copies of the distance learning playbook for parents. And as soon as I'm able to get myself up to speed on that, I will be issuing invitations to families throughout the district to participate in that book study. So I'm really hopeful that that will be a way to both tap into specifically some of the challenges that families have been having in a way that will allow us to scaffold the support that can even further make the job of families in distance learning a little bit easier. So that's my report for this month. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions?
I guess I've got one comment and then a question. First, the comment is just I'd like to echo Meredith's applause, Meredith D's applause for all the administrators and the staff, and also thank her as well for getting the NUIAs not only up and running, but getting it done so quickly. NUIA issued a report, I believe it was last week, showing that those districts that have administered NUIAs so far this year have got some pretty valuable information out of it. So I think it's great that we're able to do that. And then my question is, even though we're not going to be obligated to administer the SAT this year, are we planning to administer it anyway, or have we not reached that decision yet?
I haven't been part of a conversation about the SAT in district at this time. Reg, do you have anything to add? So it looks like that discussion is in front of us still. Mark, thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, I would like to kind of encourage us to administer it nonetheless. I mean, there is increasingly a number of colleges and universities that don't require it, but some still do. And historically, we have not only administered it here, but covered the cost of it for our students. So I would hope that we would be able to continue doing that.
Thank you, Mark.
Any other questions or comments? All right, next up we have the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Most of what I have is under the COVID update, and it kind of relates down to something we're going to be doing in policy work. We received, since it was in mid to late November, we received a letter from the Department of Ed as a follow-up to our food service program review. We had a site visit last year and a full report, and then following that, they said we would have a procurement review. And with COVID, that slowed down. And so they just got the results back to us in November. And as a result of that, we have 3 findings, one of which is a policy change that we have to do, which is why we have policy EFA on the agenda down below. So I just wanted to provide some context for that. And we have to have, part of the corrective action is to have the policy update to them by the 23rd, which really isn't very responsive for how district policy processes work. It usually takes a little longer than that. So we're going to talk to you about that under policy solution for that. But I wanted you to have the context that that was one of the findings, that the our procurement procedures that we adopted around federal programs are really kind of, we lifted them really from the regs and adopted them. And part of the boilerplate adoption actually excluded food service from those particular procurement procedures. So we needed to develop these other really specific to food service procurement procedures, which is what EFA is about. The 2 other findings, one was a finding around when making small informal purchases. We have to take more care with having 2 price quotes, both requested and documented. We didn't have the documented part in all cases. And then the other finding was from our buying group alliance, the Durago Alliance. And that was a finding around having to, they found that there was not a public advertisement for the milk procurement that buying group did. It's a regional buying group. So all the districts in that buying group have this finding. And so that group is fixing that issue. So I just wanted you to know that this came and what our action is based on this is the main action that we have to do. And then we have to write a letter attaching this, assuring of the acknowledging we plan to follow the requirements around informal purchases, and that the Durago group will be correcting the last item. You have any questions about that?
Nope.
Okay.
Anything else for report, or is that?
We can just shift into
Yep, move into the
rest
next
of my
topic.
report's really under the main topic of our every meeting. Any questions though on anything else before we dive into that? Okay. So I first wanted to just acknowledge the, we've had now 3 positive cases in district in kind of quick succession, which really matches what the trends are doing lately. And I can say every time we've gone through the process, we learn something new, because no case is the same, right? They all have different nuances. And I would say this one, the biggest takeaway is that we have to document our bus ridership differently. And I think that was alluded to in the public comment, but we had lists and they had been updated somewhat, but it's a pretty fluid process for bus riding. And so one of the things that we did yesterday in our letters is in the school-wide community letter, we put in kind of a call out to families. If you have not been contacted, but you ride this bus and feel like you may be impacted, please reach out to us and stay home today and reach out to us, because we just wanted to make sure that we had reached everyone. So we had a couple of families today that we discovered through some back and forth dialogue, and have added those to our list. And, certainly if there are other families out there that we don't know about, please pass those names along to us. We are working on kind of an ongoing verification that the drivers will help us with looking at lists of what our riding records show and who they're seeing on the buses, to try to make sure that list is up to date at all times. And, as each time we've learned a little bit, but also each time, something slightly is changing in the way they want us to do this. So that it's somewhat of a moving target. But we're following both the guidance that was developed by the CDC for Maine schools, and also the direction that we get when we call the school nurse hotline. They've developed a hotline that is manned by school nurses, and they respond. We tell them about the situation, and they give us some additional guidance if we have any questions about how to proceed. So in every case, that feedback has really been helpful, and proceeded with the notifications. And certainly, every time that this has been done, I would say that, people have been very appreciative and understanding of the situation. No one wants to receive that call, certainly don't like making them, but, overall families have, been very receptive to the information we're giving them, and been very communicative back if there's information that helps us as follow-up. I would just assure everyone that we're following CDC guidance. We get questions a lot about secondary, tertiary contacts. That's the most common question I think we get in this process. And it's really clear from the CDC that level of contact is not considered close contact. And so it's not something that is part of the process. And, that's straight from, CDC guidance, and we're following that. I'm not going further than what the CDC is the right place. As an educator, they know a lot more about this disease and epidemiology than I do. So I'm following the guidance we've been given, and, we're going to proceed as it changes, as it did this week, actually. So there's just been another change in the length of quarantine. So that's starting as of basically, after Friday ended, new quarantine requirements were kind of given to Maine schools following the drop from 14 to 10 days. So we'll have to go into our documents and update that, and get that out to the school community. So that's just one example of how things are constantly changing. I want to pause there for the board and see if you have any questions about any of that. Okay. One of the things we've been talking about each meeting is just the data, where things stand. I know we've been looking at the CDC charts. Let me just hold it up so you recognize which one I'm talking about. It's the one that's straight off the CDC site. I download it every day we have a meeting. So, I just keep my old school stack here in my board folder. I have them on my desktop too, but this is more useful for me right now. So that I can, know for today and also go back in time. I do think the CDC has now added a feature where you can go back in time. It wasn't there initially, but I think they have added that now. But for, today's cases, you can see, where things stand. Probably most notable to me is looking at the case rate on these charts, where the case rate was, over time with all of these charts, and where it is now. And I think Brian has shared his data charts that he's been tracking, because, as we all discovered that the daily data disappeared from kind of our public portal viewpoint on the CDC site, Brian started capturing it. I don't know when, Brian, maybe sometime in November, to begin making charts. And so he provided his chart today. Would you mind, Brian, just kind of summarizing what you see in the data that you provided?
Sure. So let me just pull it up here. I mean, basically, numbers are clearly, the last couple of weeks, no secret. Penobscot County has not really seen COVID come home in Penobscot County, except very briefly after the wedding, which it fortunately got snuffed out at. But that's not been the case more recently. it's been climbing pretty drastically. We've been going from 2 cases a day to we're up around 30 cases a day. Today and yesterday were pretty good, quote, pretty good days relative to other times because it's been at 17 and 22 again, which is higher than anything we've seen until the last 10 days. But it's a lot lower than it was the few days before that. But I think we're also seeing the testing starting to backlog. And in general, I've learned to really not draw any conclusion about trends from 2 or 3 days. So we'll have to wait for a week to see if that drop the last 2 days in Penobscot County is real or not. But Maine certainly is continuing to show a strong upward trend. The incidence rate is down to about 1 in 500 people is sick right now. Not has been sick sometime in the last 6 months, but is sick right now. So that's a pretty key figure in my mind. That suggests there's several people in the schools at any point that are sick, carrying the virus. How sick the symptoms are is a matter of individual variation, but that's a key point. And I think it's also important to look at the testing number. We're up about 4.5% as a state, and I haven't seen the positivity number for Penobscot County pulled out for today, but I know it was up to 3.9% last week, so that number is certainly shooting up too. We're, the last 2 days in Penobscot County give a slight sign of hope, but in general, I think it's pretty hard not to see a pretty bad trend happening. Oops, somebody just posted that the positive, I don't know if that, I think that's a Maine, not a Penobscot County positivity rate, but yeah, the positivity rates are not good and the case rates are not good.
So related to that, the school advisory health rating came out last Friday. And I think, the whole school community is probably aware of that. And we're on the watch, the kind of closely monitored is what they refer to those who are in a designation, but on the cusp of potentially moving to another designation. So that's us as a green, closely monitored district, and we'll see. They did indicate that Friday there would be another report. So that will, I will be really interested to see. I think I said last week that I would, last week was really the first week that I really felt like we might be going to yellow. And I still feel that way. And we'll see what comes as a result of this Friday and the data that the CDC brings this week. And so in the email Friday, I did communicate to, particularly speaking to the K2 families, the thinking that we would have K2 remain full in person. And because we were able to maintain distancing there, really we're not able to maintain that in too many other places around the district, consistently anyway. Like in the middle and high school, we certainly can maintain 6-foot distancing in some places, but not all places. So the K2 families, I wanted to make sure they knew that that was a change that we had decided to make at this time. And as I said, it's constantly being reconsidered. I think all along we've said this is not something that we can make a plan in August and say, great, we're done with that. And, we'll just look at our plan each week that tells us what to do because it has to constantly be reevaluated. And so I wanted to let them know of that change. Kind of related to that in the board folder was the enrollment chart for, was as of last Friday. And there have been a few adjustments made today, but I didn't update the chart in your folder because I didn't want to kind of change gears on you after you'd already taken a look at it, but I'll kind of highlight what is a little different. So I think it's helpful when I'm looking at the enrollment chart to look at several kind of snapshots to be able to see the trends over time. And so, what I see when you can see the different points in time. November 4th is when we made the change to bring back some additional students in 3rd grade, 7th grade, and 12th grade at the high school. And then additionally, particularly at the high school, more students who were, showing that they needed more in-person time to be successful. So we made that change, and then I don't remember the date off the top of my head, but when things began to feel like they were certainly going in a different direction, we pushed pause on that plan and didn't move forward with bringing back more students. So the December 4th enrollment summary, what we've actually seen is we've seen more families than we had been opting to move to full remote than we had been. Obviously, families are making that choice in response to either the holiday is what they're saying, and it's they're wanting it to be a temporary change and we're allowing that flexibility, or some are saying I'm just going to make that change for now and we can revisit when I'm feeling more comfortable. So that's what's a little different about the enrollment summary compared to what you have. For the high school, there are I think 8 more students than what was on the Friday chart that have moved over to full remote, evenly split across the full in-person and hybrid group. So we have that happening at each school, really. I think maybe more so at the middle and high school than I think I've seen at ASA in the numbers, but Kristen certainly correct me if I'm wrong there. And so, when we look at the numbers, as I said last meeting, when we look at positive cases as they begin to happen, the hybrid grades, especially for middle and high school, where we don't have potting in the same way that we do at ASA, keeping those attendance numbers lower, I think is the best move right now. And if we go yellow, those would go even lower. At ASA, it really is, it's just different because there's not cross movement across classrooms like there is in the upper grades. So it feels comfortable to me to stay, as we've identified there, with K through 2 continuing to attend full in person and 3 through 5 being hybrid. So the numbers are part of the conversation, though, about we told you tonight we were going to bring back feedback on our initial thinking about equity down the line as we look forward and consider the rest of the year. How do we try to kind of bring balance to the fact that some grades and students have had the opportunity to be full in person much more than other students at this point, and how we might approach that. So I've asked each principal to just talk about their planning they've done so far. We've wanted to really spend time talking with each staff about this. I think the ASA meeting was just this afternoon. So now it's just, we really just have some initial thoughts, and we'll, continue to shape these also as we see where we are over the next few weeks to know, what trend we're in, and we're hesitant to put down kind of dates in a firm plan yet, but rather begin to have the essence of a plan formulated so that when we feel like we can begin to put dates to it, we have it ready to do that. So tonight's just some initial sharing. Certainly when we come back in January, we can give an update on thinking based on where things stand there. So I was going to ask Kristen, Richard, and Reg to just spend some time talking about at each school kind of the thinking around how we might approach that. Does that work for the board to do it that way?
Sounds good.
So I think we
works
should
for me.
either start with Kristen or Reg, and I don't care which. You guys can decide.
Can I start? Do you mind, Richard? Reg?
Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Meredith, for introducing everything. And so I met with the ASA advisory team on Thursday of last week, and we started having conversations, and we came up with some we came up with 3 scenarios. And so this afternoon at the ACES staff meeting, we talked further as a full staff about those scenarios. And so basically we have 3 kind of ideas. And I think, as Meredith has said, it really a lot depends on where we are with everything and how the cases are moving forward. So we understand that there are some area schools that have started doing this. So one of our ideas was to add in an additional day in the week for each cohort. So for instance, if we were starting with the first week, cohort A would go Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday as well, while cohort B stayed Thursday, Friday. And then the following week, cohort A would go Monday, Tuesday, and then cohort B would go Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So it would give each cohort an additional day every other week. So that was one of our thoughts. Another thought was a rotation, keep K3 full in person as it is now, pre-K3 full in person, and do a rotation of 4th grade and 5th grade. So for instance, 1 week, 4th grade would be full in person while 5th grade stayed hybrid. And we talked about, we weren't sure how many weeks would be a good consistent amount of time for that full in person. So that's one of the things we're still talking more about. So it would just basically be a switch. And then another option we came up with, option number 3, we would have pre-K 2 would stay full in person. And then we would have like essentially it would be 3rd grade, and then 2 of the 4th grade classrooms would become a group that would attend full in person while the others stayed hybrid. And then for a set amount of time, and then we would switch, and then 3rd grade and those 2 4th grade classrooms would go hybrid, while the remaining 4th grade classroom and 5th grade became the full in person. So those are the 3 scenarios we kind of came up with. One of the 2 of the things that we really need to look more at, obviously without, obviously how the numbers are looking, but we have to see how this impacts the buses, how many kiddos would be put extra on the bus. That would be a definite consideration on which plan would make the most sense. And then the other thing was the length of the rotation. How many weeks would a certain cohort stay as a full in person? So that's kind of where we are right now. And like Meredith said too, we're not really sure of a start date. We kind of thought, we were talking about the 2 weeks after Christmas seemed like, that's when we might see the spike in cases again, if there was travel outside of the state or gatherings and things. So those are things that we've talked about as an ACES staff. As usual, they have the most amazing ideas. So very lucky principal.
Should we take questions now if there are any questions?
Why don't we just work through, and then we
Okay.
can discuss after all 3 share.
Okay.
I'll
Go ahead,
jump in
Richard,
then.
if you don't mind.
Sound good? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about our planning. And I think, as to many of us, the equity of time of in-person learning is important, because I think, I think the remote learning is valuable, and it's providing a good experience for kids, but it doesn't replace in-person learning, in my view. So to date, if we make it through to January 22nd in the current model, that would have give 6th grade 2 quarters of in-person learning, okay, and 7th grade of 1 quarter of in-person learning, okay. So, and again, that's if we make it to January 22nd. So obviously that leaves our 8th graders who are currently in the hybrid model without any full quarters of in-person learning. So that is the group that I would like to provide an opportunity for more in-person learning opportunities. When I think about 4th quarter, which starts in April, a lot can change between now and then, okay? But I think quarter 3 is certainly in our sights. You know, it's coming up fairly quickly, and I would like to get 8th graders in here in person Q3, and then hope for the best for Q4. But again, I think there's we need to kind of like take a wait and see approach to Q4. What that would mean, in my opinion, is 8th graders have approximately about 61 students. They're our largest cohorts, and if they're full in person, that would bump some of our class sizes up to 22, 23 students, you know, approximately. It'd be tight, is what I'm saying. So we're thinking creatively about ways to get them in here, and how we would manage those larger numbers in some classes. Okay, so it's not insurmountable, but it's a challenge. So I think in order to help manage that, we would have to look at reducing the numbers of 6th and 7th graders in the building. So that would reduce the overall footprint. So I think moving grade 6 and 7 back to a hybrid model would allow us to provide more in-person opportunity for 8th graders. So I'm kind of taking that approach, and I'm always open to new ideas as we move forward. You know, if someone has a good idea, then we can entertain that and look at options as a consideration. But that's sort of my general thinking right now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. So last week at our faculty meeting at the high school, we split up into 3 groups. We really had 3 topics to discuss. And I will say that this topic around equity and bringing students back was the most attended. Probably had 20 teachers attend this group. And so a lot of interest. You know, really one theme that emerged was our desire to balance, you know, equality with equity, and make sure we're not just taking the approach that, you know, every student has an equal opportunity, that, you know, every student can attend 4 days, say 4 or 5 week period of time, that we also balance that with equity, that we look at what students need for attendance. And so we don't want to lose sight of, you know, really examining students whose attendance isn't great, whose grades aren't great, with providing an opportunity for everyone to return. So having said that, kind of where we've landed is, once we're back in the mode of bringing more students back into the building, to really just survey the entire population of high school parents and gauge the, you know, again, what's the interest level, and from that data, we'll get to see how many we can bring back based on the demand. And then try to balance looking at student data around attendance and grades, and also their opportunity to have attended so far, you know, that year in full attendance. So that's where we're landing at this point.
Yeah, and I would say to kind of summarize, we've taken kind of that initial feedback, and I think every school has a slightly different kind of approach to how they might handle this. But I think, you know, what we saw in particular at the high school is that, you know, the data that we had, and in terms of the number of families who were interested, did not end up matching the number of families who actually took advantage of the opportunity when it was provided. So I think probably district-wide, as we get to the point of being ready to do that, it's important to collect that information so we can, you know, make the best decisions based on that, to, you know, establish kind of the framework based on more known information, other than, you know, we have 61 students in 8th grade. So how do we fit 61 students? It might not be 61. It might be, you know, 45 students want to come in person, and figuring out what that means for how we handle some of those classes that Richard was talking about that are more challenging than others, and same in other grades. So I think that kind of surveying, once we feel like we're getting to the point of of looking at beginning a process, I think would help inform this. And the problem to me about doing a survey now is we're not at the cusp, at least I don't think we are, of making this kind of change. So to survey now doesn't survey people at the time that I think, in this context, I would guess fewer people would want to return to full in person than if we get to the point where we're preparing to make that kind of change, the numbers would probably be improved and more families would respond affirmatively. So I think that's a little ways out. Go ahead.
Well, and also I think this approach would allow us to bring more kids back sooner, rather than maybe originally we had like kind of this staggered every 3 weeks, bring back a grade level, but we might be able to bring, I don't know, depending on the demand, 50 students back each week over 3 weeks. So that also could be a possible outcome.
So open it up for questions or comments on that.
Any questions or comments from the board?
The only,
Yes, I'll-
You hear?
I'll-
No,
Oh,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry.
I'll hold off. Go ahead, Jake.
No, I just had more of a comment, which is, I totally understand Mark's point on this, and I appreciate the out of the box thinking, so to speak, that you guys have been trying to do around this. I think the only one who addressed the elephant in the room, so to speak, is Richard, which is that given the current COVID environment, it seems like some students would have to go in order for some students to come back. That's the unfortunate part at this point, but I do appreciate the brainstorming around it. And, that's really the only comment I have on it right now.
Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I really appreciate the out of box thinking. I appreciate that report, and I think that the report in the folder showing the numbers is impressive, actually. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think ASA and the middle school have effectively doubled, and the high school, which did have the lowest number up front, is like 5x times now people in our students that are going full in person. Does that jive with what I looked at it earlier, and I don't have it in front of me, but yeah, I thought I was really pleased to see those numbers. And the bottom line is, just listening to you guys, this absolutely sounds hard, and I appreciate the effort going in to try to get the equity. Reg, when you first started talking, I'm like, I don't know if I like this, but as the more you went on, I think that does make really, I think you guys are doing a good job. And obviously you guys are, feet on the street and know best what needs to happen. So I appreciate all that work. And as far as, I feel like Richard mentioned potentially people, having to have some classes going to hybrid versus, and the others didn't, but my hunch is we're kind of looking at, when we get to that sort of next phase that we had previously talked about, that's gone by the wayside now. So I think keep talking and keep coming up with the solutions. And I mean, and the fact that, really the high school has changed pretty dramatically from what we had 3 weeks ago. But that's really a good thing, I think, in my opinion. So appreciate the efforts. Okay, that's it. I did want to talk about Nuia's, but I got cut off earlier, so maybe I can go back to that later, but that's it for now. Thanks.
Thanks, Leo. Yeah, I agree. I mean, the only way we're going to survive this semester is flexible, creative thinking, out of the box thinking, and really adaptive real-time thinking. So I'm hearing all of that in what's going forward. So I just appreciate the effort. And I think everybody listening probably appreciates, as much as we'd like to say, this is what we're going to do next. We're just not in a place where we can do that. So I appreciate that, but I also appreciate the flexible thinking that I'm hearing. Anybody else?
I guess I'll kind of echo what everybody else has said so far. So definitely appreciate the effort, and also agree with Leo that these are incredibly difficult decisions. So I fully recognize the just huge amount of struggle that everybody has to go through as they try and figure out what to do here. That being said, I think kind of echoing maybe off something Jake said, I think the only one of those three options that fully addresses at least what I've been looking for all along, it was the option that Richard provided, right? Richard provided an option on the table that really does achieve equity. The OHS option, I think, to be quite honest, is it's too early to say what that would do. I mean, essentially, we're going to survey people when the situation gets better. That's a good first step, I suppose. But whether it meets the goal or doesn't meet the goal, I think it's way too early to say on that. And there's a lot more work that would need to be done on the OHS option, in my opinion. The ASA option doesn't, in my view, meet the equity concerns. We still end up with 2 grades, or maybe 3, if depending on which option we take, it's 4th or 5th for sure, maybe 3rd as well, that end up with significantly less in-person time. And I recognize that the earlier grades have different challenges and different needs maybe than some of the older grades at ASA. But at the same time, if we're looking, at 4th and 5th graders in particular, these 5th graders are going to be asking them to make a pretty big transition next year. And if they go an entire year without being able to go very much at all full time in person, I think we're doing them a huge disservice. So I know it's a tough one, but I don't think any of the 3 ASA options that are put forward really meets at least what I was looking for. So I again, I appreciate the work, but I think the only one of those 3 that fully gets us, along the path that we hope we can take, right, is the OMS option.
Hi.
Can I just,
Oh yeah.
oops, sorry. I'm only seeing a few on the screen. No, you go, sorry.
Aaron first, then Leo.
Okay, I was just going to say, I know that I have been the I was very cautious about the start of school, as we were going into this from the summer. But I've been reading study after study that kind of shows that school is not, they're not the super spreader spots. It's not where transmission is really happening, especially in elementary school and those younger grades. So, I just feel like as much as we can keep those grades in, I've kind of flipped 180, and I feel like the more we can get the kids into school in those younger grades, the better off we're going to be. Now, I do feel a little bit leery about high school just because they really are becoming the adults. On the other hand, we have to do everything we can to protect, our staff and the adults in the building. So that's just what I wanted to throw out there.
Thanks, and go ahead, Leo.
Yeah, I wanted to just make one of the things that Reg mentioned with the high school thing that I think mentioned doing a survey to the whole community. The other thing he mentioned was, understanding where the attendance deficits are and, kind of what they know internally. And I could, again, I think it's going to keep morphing, but I could envision that being the plan to kind of do that work and kind of identify, which probably they're already doing that. I don't obviously know what's going on, but that method might be even, I think, more critical to ID those students that are clearly struggling with this, and even if they get first offer, and so I do, again, I think, just reiterate, it sounds really hard. I like that we're thinking about it, and I think, as I said before, kind of don't stop thinking, because that's sort of where I was leaning from Reg's presentation there, or talk, that I think that to me seems like something that might be really needed to get the students that really need to be there in there. So ultimate flexibility, I guess, is the final word, but that's it. Thanks.
So I appreciate all that feedback. And I think that, I simply feel differently about K2 right now in particular. I don't think if we can keep them in the building for the entire year, that's really a goal I have. It was our goal last summer. Early learners are, the ones who will have the greatest challenge with remote learning or hybrid learning, and that, we balance that with, the like 3 through 5 learners are, able with increasing independence to have some meaningful engagement independently, especially for kiddos that maybe don't have as much home support, or parents who are having to work and can't attend to have to be with them as much. That really K2 needed the priority to be in person as much as possible. And then to think about in ASA, the other 3 grades, kind of, depending on what's in front of us, which is so unknown, so that there's time for everyone to have full in-person opportunity at some point. And I think, the ASA staff kind of put their own twist on that concept when we're looking at, overall, what's the time that a student's getting over the course of, let's say, the second half of the school year is probably what we're looking at, and thinking about trying to maximize as much time as possible for as many students as possible, given the conditions. I mean, that is what we're going to be working toward. I kind of have the start of second semester as a goal. I hope that that's a time that we can implement some changes, but time will tell with the trends. And I think that does give us plenty of time to see what's happening with conditions and to assess, like the high school's kind of concept of a survey. I don't think it really takes a long time to gear up with that kind of survey and to organize that. And yes, it might mean, grades who've been full in person. We have 12th grade who will have had a full 9 weeks now, full in person at the high school. They too might have to kind of shift back to more hybrid attendance in deference to other groups who haven't had that time. I think that's implied in kind of what might be the plan there. But I think the idea is that, if we see that, I'm going to make up a number here, 50% of the 9th and 10th grade and 11th grade are the ones that want to come back. I think we can achieve a greater number of students back than if, 80%, like in our survey. I think we had some grades really high, like, as I recall, almost 70% of the grades wanting to come back full in person. And so just knowing those numbers, as we are in January, will help us determine just how much we can bring students back and what that rotation might look like. So, I think we do have time in front of us as, the conditions play out, so that when we're asking the question of families, there's a little more recency with asking the question in the context of whatever the pandemic's doing at that time. Other thoughts or feedback on that?
Anything else?
Hey, could I jump in quickly? I apologize. I got cut off on 2 things I wanted to just bring up from previous. One on, is that all right?
Go ahead, Leo.
The one was the reporting and the numbers. Of course, case numbers are an important number that we're tracking. I think hospitalizations are as well, probably more important in my opinion. Obviously, as there are more cases, I think there are definitely obviously a lot more people getting tested, a lot more healthy people that are getting tested through association, exposure and all of that. So it's pretty clear there are a lot of asymptomatic or healthy people that are getting tested as well. So case numbers are important. We should look at hospital numbers, which are on the report that we have, and looking for November so far. I think we've had 12 hospitalizations in Penobscot County total. of 154,000 people, 152,000 people. So I think that's a relevant number to be cognizant of as well. I think I download those every few days. On the November 3rd, we had 8 new hospitalizations, and then on the 7th we had 4 new. So that there's 12 for the Penobscot County over the first of the month. So I think that's a worthwhile number to be looking at as well, is my only point there. It's on the report, obviously, but and the other thing I wanted to just ask about, because I got cut off when Meredith Diamond was speaking, the NOEAs. I read the report, and it wasn't clear to me. Is that still a state mandate? And I know board members feel differently about this than I do probably, but is it still a state mandate that we have to be doing the standardized test this year? I thought I read that they haven't given us any pass on that. Is that correct?
So the way that it unfolded, the Maine DOE requested a waiver from the federal DOE. And last year states were given a waiver, which is why states, we didn't have to do the testing in the spring of 2020. But the request for a waiver for 2021 was denied. So we are under obligation at this point in time from the federal government to administer spring assessments. It was in response to that the Maine DOE said, well, then we want to rethink how we're doing this, because we're not really satisfied with one static data point from one grade annually, right? That ultimately is not something that can be reflected upon and impact instruction during the course of an academic year. So at this point, the state is figuring out essentially what our assessment is going to be moving forward. We know that it is not going to be the Empower assessment that we have given over the past few years. The implication that my understanding, and I don't know, Meredith, if yours is the same, is that there is both a short-term and a long-term discussion about this. So the state is currently working on a solution for spring of 2021, but they're also engaging in a longer range conversation with stakeholders, or they're going to engage in that conversation with stakeholders from around the state to come up with, a not produced in a pressure moment, but thoughtfully constructed plan for assessment in Maine. Does that answer your question, Leo?
Yeah, I think, except for ultimately, so are we required? Yes, I think so. We are required to do NOEA's PERP because the federal has not given us a waiver. Is that the?
Well, we're required to do an assessment. We don't yet know what that assessment is going to be for this year. So we are not at this point required to do NOEAs. Our district assessment or administration of NOEAs this fall administration really, I think, was driven more so by a desire to get a handle on where our students are at, and where are there maybe some critical needs that we have overlooked. Where should we be investing our attention and time in order to mitigate gaps that could have either emerged from or been aggravated by our COVID-19 learning circumstance.
Gotcha. So I think it's, we've just talked about equity and deficits, and I totally appreciate that we do need to, we want to understand where kids are, but I just wonder with the already deficit that we have of teaching class time, and probably I'm sure there's maybe a large percentage of kids that are anxious about these formalized tests. I don't know if they've been altered at all for the grade levels, but I mean, I assume maybe we probably haven't calculated the total deficit, but there's clearly since last March been major deficits in class time. And so combining those two and going forward with the test just seems in the wrong, and this is just my opinion, obviously, and but it just seems so wrong-headed to me, going down that path right now, because and I don't know if it's a week, it ends up taken out of, instructional time, and, a week's 2 days for a lot of these kids for in-person. So I don't know. Is anyone just, and maybe I don't know if I missed any of this conversation, but does anyone else have any concerns about this?
Leo, I guess I'm one of the people who comes down on the opposite side. If we were talking about the Empower test, I would completely agree with you. To be perfectly honest, I saw the Empower test as a complete waste of time. There was some misguided attempt to hold schools accountable. It was not a formative test that helped teachers teach students at all. So it was a waste of time. But the NUIAs, first off, it takes a week of a school's time, but it does not take a week of an individual student's instruction. It takes, I think, more like half a day of an individual student's instruction. But it's actually, it's a false dichotomy of testing versus teaching. If you have the right kind of test, the testing can actually be highly informative about what to teach. And this district has really homed in on NUIAs because NUIAs are actually a very strong formative test. They give subscores in lots of areas, and they really help identify at the level of, we talk a lot about individualized instruction, and the NUIAs actually give at the level of individual students areas of instruct, specific math areas that maybe a piece of scaffolding is missing, that it's hard to move on to the next topic in math until that's covered. And teachers, they can get some of this out of interacting with students, but NUIAs can actually be an efficiency to improve teaching. So I think that's important. And in my mind, I guess we're reading COVID oppositely, but in my mind, COVID only further magnifies that need for us to understand where the deficits are, both on the macro scale, at a board level. We all know that not as much has been taught since March of 2020 as normally would have been taught since March of 2020. I think the efforts of teachers and students and parents and administrators has all been heroic. And I think Orono's teaching about as much as literally anywhere in the country has been teaching over that time period, but it's not as much as normally would have been taught. And we really have to get honest about that and start measuring that so we can start planning what kind of resources are we going to need to recover the deficit for these kids before they graduate. So, and then again, at the individual level, to the degree that individual kids have individual deficits, that's only, I'm sure, been amplified. Every kid's probably in a more different place than they would have been if they were all sitting in the same classroom all the time. So I don't like the Empower test. I think it's a waste of time. I think the NUIA actually is part of teaching. It's not a dichotomy with teaching. And I think COVID has only amplified the need for that assessment. Again, just my opinion, but that's where I'm coming from. And we're clearly going to have to give a test for the spring. Nobody knows for sure, but from rumblings I heard at the Maine School Board Association conference and rumblings and rumors I've been hearing, I think there's a pretty good chance it's going to end up at the NUIA anyway, but we're going to have to give a test this spring. And I think the NUIA has actually a positive benefit to student teaching. So it's pretty hard for me. We have to give a test. This one's a good test that's helpful. So I have a pretty strong perspective that we should be going ahead with it.
One of the other thing, that all makes perfect sense, Brian, and I agree with all of your points, honestly. And on paper, it sounds really great. And if staff all actually can use this test effectively, and they have time, that's what kind of scares me a lot, honestly. Is and maybe it's not burdensome on staff. If it's not, then I guess end of story. I just can't imagine if it is another thing that we're stacking on, that they're going to have to go and look at those and use those in addition to everything else they're doing. that I'm laughing because that seems kind of laughable at this point. Honestly, I think we've got most staff, in basically feeling like it's May 25th here in December. So that whatever, if that's no burden, then I get it and it makes sense. If it's more of a burden, then I'm not. I guess I'm still real hesitant to think that that's a good direction. But that's
So
it.
honestly, I think we talked about this a couple of meetings ago, and we have really set things in motion. Things have been moving down the track. It's not unburdensome. And it certainly does take time. And, you know, we delayed doing it really because we felt like we wanted to not take the time to do that. But, you know, recently just reading some data that was provided, decided that, you know, it's time to do this. We feel like there's good information to be gleaned from this. And it's worth the time that it's going to take, because it does take, you know, what is really precious time right now the students have. So we talked about it at our curriculum committee, and that group reached consensus that it was would be valuable as well. And we, you know, started testing today, plan on finishing up before December 22nd, or by December 22nd. And really, you know, it's, I think, another way to just see, you know, where are our students, and are students having deficits that we're not, that we haven't discovered yet. And this test is a pretty, you know, it's a broad test. So there may be some deficits that a student has based on, you know, the last 9 months of their education that, you know, this year's curriculum hasn't circled to yet, or maybe this year's curriculum doesn't do, and it is in next year's curriculum. But this test will help us just uncover if there are deficits that we can be more proactive with. So I definitely think it's worth the investment. But I think, to your point, it's only worth the investment as much as we use the information, and that'll be a key part of what we do after the test results are available to us.
All right, thanks for letting me circle back to that.
Anything else?
I did have one more topic under kind of COVID
Okay.
update discussion, but I wanted to make sure we were done with any follow-up about any of the things I mentioned so far. Okay, I'll shift to, at our last meeting, we talked about winter sports. And I mentioned that we were going to have some discussion with Old Town around our cooperative teams. We have cooperative teams with Old Town for hockey and swimming. We met, we've had back and forth dialogue. Mike Archer specifically has had very direct, been working directly with Old Town, the athletic director, as well as the coaching staffs there, to work on, you know, how this partnership will work this year. We value the partnership greatly. I think both Old Town and Orono clearly stated in our meeting today, we both really value this partnership, but both recognize it just has to look a little different this year. And just want to, you know, follow up with the board to let you know that they've worked on, between Mike and Jeremy Busquet, the AD in Old Town, and the coaches have worked on just some protocols that they'll have in place this year in an effort to not just follow the, you know, safety guidelines from MPA, but also have an eye toward trying to minimize kind of that cross school interaction as much as they can. There's some ways that it's just going to be really challenging, but there are other ways that they can definitely minimize contact. And so they're working, they've developed some frameworks for that, and are planning on using those as they roll out those seasons. So I just wanted to let you know that Old Town is moving forward. I think the start date over in Old Town is sometime in the next week or so. It sounded like it was still being determined maybe, but definitely by the 21st of December. And, you know, as long as things are still moving forward, it all depends on the school advisory health rating. And, but if the school advisory health rating doesn't change, and the state doesn't change its position on the community sports guidelines, they would move forward kind of following both the MPA guidelines and these cooperative sports protocols that we put in place. Some of them are things like, you know, different transportation when we're going to events, keeping bench areas separated, particularly in hockey, you know, practicing doing separate areas for drills and such. So there's a whole list of them, but good thinking has gone into that work. Any questions? I know I saw Mike's on the call. Reg has been involved as well. So any questions about that or feedback?
I had a question maybe for Reg or Mike, but the data I've been seeing shows that hockey is just unlike most of the other sports that have been going off without having super spreader events. Hockey is repeatedly having super spreader events, and there's all sort of speculation about whether it's because it's cold or the cold air creates a stratification of the air and no circulation. All kinds of speculation. Nobody really knows, but just empirically, hockey seems to be a much more of a spreading event than any other sport, even like travel basketball or some of those things that have been going on over the summer. Has anybody heard any thoughts of at the MPA level, for example, of treating hockey differently based on that data?
Well, the sports medicine committee actually met today, and that was brought up. It wasn't on the agenda as a topic of discussion, but at the end of the meeting, that was brought up kind of in the same way you brought it up now, Brian, is just questioning, is it ventilation at some of the ice arenas? Is it dependent on kind of the age of the building? And there wasn't any action taken or recommendations made, but just more around trying to understand why hockey might be more susceptible to a spread, I guess. But the feeling is it probably has something to do with the ventilation and in the older buildings that just doesn't get the airflow down on the ice that other buildings might have.
Thanks. I'm just glad to hear that that's being discussed. I know it's early days, but the data is starting to look compelling on that particular topic. So I'm glad that that's being thought about.
Brian, if I can just add too that, we spent some time today talking about, hockey is a pretty spatial game. It's a big area, and with less, less people on than it would be like football or something like that. And we're really focusing our attention in an area too of the downtime. It's the instruction time or the practice time when players can be in closer proximity during drills or during instruction time. So we've really spent some time with the coaches talking about how we can create some separation there. And, it's going to be a delicate balance between feeling like Old Town Orono together and having some elements of being, two separate entities at the same time. And so I think the coaches are recognize that. Jeremy and I both recognize that. And, we feel really good where we're at right now in terms of, what our initial plan is. And I think, this delay in the start of the season in terms of phase one can help us achieve some of that too, just from the standpoint that, for the first 3 weeks, if we're allowed to start next week, we'll be separated. We'll be, it'll be an Old Town pod and an Orono pod. So that helps buy some time to think about some other things along the way as well.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I agree that buying the time is important right now because anybody who claims they know what's going on is probably not right. But it is to me counterintuitive. I would have thought football and basketball would be worse than hockey, but just empirically, the data, something about just being on the ice doesn't look that safe, and nobody knows what it is. So I'm not convinced we're going to be able to pod and rule our way out of it on hockey. But nobody knows. I think what you said is an important point. We bought some time.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the MPA is paying attention to it.
And it would be interesting too to find out the overall research in terms of, are these outbreaks happening in school sponsored activities, or are they, the majority of the breakouts happening in recreational or travel type? I just feel like we're going to pay a lot more attention to those types of things than in school related than not.
Yep, that's a good point too. Anybody else? Anything more? Do you have more, Meredith?
Nope, that was the last item.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next topic, which is staff nominations. We have a few co-curricular nominations. I would make a motion to approve the slate of co-curricular appointments for the year as presented. Is there a second?
I second.
And just to read them for people who don't have it, the high school drama one-act play would be Rachel Sear. The show choir choreographer would be Daniel Perkins. The middle school boys B basketball team would be Kristen Espling. And the middle school cheering would be Sherry Hamill. Is there any discussion or questions? We'll go ahead and vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Leo,
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. That passes. Now we come up to some policies. So as I mentioned during the agenda adjustments, we're not going to do any revision of DJR or EFA. We do have a second read on the ACAA policies. I mentioned this when we discussed it. Gosh, it was 4 weeks ago now. But so this is coming back for a second read. These changes were required by changes in not the federal law of Title IX, but the federal regulations interpreting Title IX about how investigations into sexual harassment have to occur. So we've changed our policies to recognize that federal language in places where the federal language applies. So, and this has all been through the policy committee, and everybody in the policy committee is happy with that. So I believe ACA is the general statement on sexual harassment, and ACAA is the statement on sexual harassment of students, if I've got that right. And so I would make a motion to approve, acknowledge a second read and adopt as modified and presented the policies AC, ACAA, and ACAAR. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion or questions on those? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Leo,
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Next up, we have things here for first reads. The first one is the matching policy for sexual harassment of staff. We deferred this in the policy committee because we had to consult with a lawyer on a particular topic, but we did that. And so what we're bringing forward for a first read matches what the policy committee is recommending, but it's very parallel to the changes at ACAA. So I would make a motion to to recognize a first read of policies ACAB and ACABR. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion or questions? We'll go ahead and vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Leo,
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Next up, this is in the category of policies where we're trying to catch up from the changes to the Maine state laws that occurred during the 2019 legislative session. One of the new laws is closing the loophole that if an employee is under investigation for an egregious behavior like inappropriate contact with a student or alcohol in the class or something like that, that in the past, if they quit, then the investigation didn't, there's a law that says if a negative finding happens, it has to be reported to the state. So the person can't just move from district to district without this record following them. But there was a loophole that if they quit their job before the investigation was completed, there was no longer any compulsion or even, I think, ability to report it to the state that there was an investigation that they short-circuited. So we passed one policy already on that topic, but this is the other policy we need to, one side was us reporting it when we're in the middle of things. The other side was us actually checking before hiring. We passed that part, the checking before hiring, see if anybody had investigation on short-circuited. In Jeep policy GCF last time, but this is the policy on the other side of us reporting it, just making it into policy that what is in fact state law, that we have to report it to the state if one of these investigations is terminated. So I would make a motion to recognize a first read on policy GBEB staff conduct. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion or questions? We'll go ahead and vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Leo,
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
I also vote aye. All right, we come to the last policy. Meredith mentioned that we, during the audit, it was pointed out that our current policies on purchasing excluded food service, which is a violation of federal law, or at least federal fund regulations, probably not federal law, but the regulations anyway. We got dinged in the food service audit for that. So we need to fix this by December 23rd. So I'm going to, normally by policy, we recognize a first read and then 2 weeks later a second read, but we don't have time to do that. So when I motion this, I'm going to motion it that technically we just need a majority vote to pass it on a first read, but I'm going to, just to make it more transparent, I'm going to make a motion to suspend the rules and adopt it in a single read. So, but it's basically, it was given to us by the federal government, and they said, if you put this policy in place, you'll be in compliance. So that's where it came from. But the policy committee did give it a thorough read and feels comfortable and feels like this is an appropriate policy. So the policy committee is recommending it. I'm going to make a motion to suspend the rules and adopt this policy on a single read. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion or questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote just on the motion to suspend the rules, and then we'll vote on whether to adopt the policy. Aaron,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Leo,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
I also vote aye. So now I will make a motion to adopt this policy on first read. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Leo,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
I also vote aye. That was a lot of policies, but most of these have been circulating around. We're on to subcommittee reports. You've just seen what the policy subcommittee's been working on. Next up for January, we're looking at policies on use of vehicles. Now that we have two district-owned vehicles, we're introducing a policy on district-owned vehicles, and we're revisiting the policy on staff driving students. So those are there, and we are lucky enough to have cleared the queue of necessary changes, and we're going to go back to our systematic rotating policy review. So we'll start with the DJ policies, with the rest of the Ds starting a DJ probably at the January meeting, and then start rotating through policy review from there. Anything on UTC?
No, we haven't met.
How about Spruce, Jake?
Nope.
Okay, curriculum subcommittee, I know is meeting next week, or sorry, Thursday, 2 days from now. Anything else you want to add, Mark or Meredith?
Nothing else that I want to add. I mean, Meredith may have something, but I'm looking forward to our meeting on Thursday.
I look forward to it as well, and I'm sure we'll have updates subsequent to that meeting.
Great. Facilities and building. The building committee did meet last night. You want to cover that, Meredith? Because I missed that meeting.
Sure, Mark's also there. Mark, do you want to cover it? Or I'm happy to.
No, go ahead. And then if anyone has any questions or anything else, I'll go ahead and put it in.
Okay. So 2 primary updates were given by Robin Tenenbaum from CHA. One was just the kind of covering the change orders and the budget to date, and how the change orders, compare against our contingencies. And Brian, Lynn, Gray, and myself have had several discussions with her lately, and we're wanting to take I think, most conservative approach with that by only looking at the construction contingency as our kind of basis for making decisions about change orders where we have maybe it feels more optional. But we do have the bid contingency as well. We really have some projects that we had to trim out as we were leading up to time of bid, and so we're trying to hold that as in reserve as possible to give us as much flexibility to accomplish those things we had to eliminate from the project. So that was one piece of the update. The second piece of the update was around the work of the interiors finish committees. We've had 3 subcommittees going on. I think we mentioned that at our last meeting. And all of those committees have finished their work. So kudos to all of those committees for jumping in to be a part of that process. And we feel really good about the product. I think it's going to look great. And I think everyone on those finished committees, we're just, really excited about what the way things were looking, and it just makes it feel very real to see the kind of mock-ups of the interiors finishes that we've selected. So we'll share those with the board at large soon. So Mark, anything to add? The principals are also on that group, so anything I missed?
No, I mean, I'd kind of echo everything you said there. And especially the work that was done by those finishing committees. I mean, the fact that they did not only all the work that they did, but they did it seems to me at a pretty impressive pace to produce those kind of results. So that's great work on their part. Those renderings, particularly of the cafeteria and the auditorium, were pretty cool to look at. So I think the rest of the board would want to take a look at those. They're pretty impressive to see. Also, Robin just kind of gave us a general update as work was going on. And it seems to me as someone, without any contracting expertise, that things are going, according to plan. Things are getting done, moving forward pretty quickly. It looks like, everything is going the way that it was planned to go. So I think everything seems to me at least to be on track, both in terms of budget and also the amount of work that's being done. So things look good.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's an ongoing battle. Meredith and I are involved in weekly meetings, and Brent, about, do we approve this cost change? Do we approve this schedule change? And so, knock on wood, I don't want to curse us, but right at this moment, both the schedule slippages and the cost slippages, I think, are small and well within the realm of what was expected. So that's going well. And in general, I feel like we've got a good team. There's issues where we disagree with the architects or the contractor, but overall, I feel like there's a good relationship where we're working towards the same end and things are going very well. So I think it is very exciting to think about things coming in close to schedule and budget. And I agree, we should share the renderings because those are fun to actually see. It's one thing to look at a line drawing of a floor plan, but it's another to actually see a visual rendering of what these rooms are going to look like. Okay. Any requests for other business from a board member?
You're forgetting about wellness, though, where Aaron might have some.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I don't have anything. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Leo.
Any requests?
Mark.
Any requests for other business? Any requests for future agenda items? All right, next up is public comment. I will just note a couple things. This is a public meeting. Anonymity is not a part of a public meeting, so anybody who makes a public comment does need to identify themselves, and in particular, by our policy, only members of Orono, citizens of Orono, and employees have a right to speak. It's just chair's discretion beyond that. So it is a normal practice for people to identify themselves, and that will be required for public comment. I also just want to say that I think we all have seen this, but one individual's completely changed the tone of the chat section. This is a public forum that's put on by the board, and I'm just not willing to watch the chat turn into a social media sewer. It's not something that's legally required. In fact, I think the legal advice is to turn off the chat section. I'm loath to do that because we've had a lot of wonderful comment, but I'm not willing to let this forum. I've seen multiple individual people, kind of had him on him attacks. I've seen the teachers criticized. It's not what that forum's for. So if one person in particular can't straighten up their act, there's not going to be a chat forum. So, or I will also consult with a lawyer about if we have the right to filter individual people in that chat forum based on their behavior and appropriateness. So that needs to change. And public comment is now open to anybody who would like to identify themselves. I would love to have public comment. I don't want anything I've been saying to be taken as not appreciating public comment. We've had this town has a history of really constructive, really positive public comment. And positive does not mean agreeing with me or the board or the administration or anybody else. It just means constructive and forward moving and fact-based and not ad hominem. So I would love to have public comment, but I do need people who have anonymous screen names to identify themselves. Anybody want a public comment?
Yeah, I'll just say really quickly that I really appreciated Reg's comments about looking at equity versus equality when looking about bringing kids back to school. And I think that emphasizing the kids with the highest need just seems to make a whole lot of sense. And so thank you for taking that approach. That's it.
Thank you. Anybody else like to make public comment? Malcolm.
Malcolm Himshoot, parent of Orono Middle School students, and it's within my power to bring my students home if the risk level seems too high for in-person school. But the risk to my students always, the risk that it will be my particular kids who get COVID could always be just a little bit, but the risk that somebody will get COVID is increasingly high every day. So, and I know that you're not tasked with total risk management because you're educators and education is your task, but there is a preventative juncture to prevent a lot of somebody's kids getting COVID over this next week or 2 weeks. So I urge that where possible, we could consider a really rapid change of course to tamp down those transmission numbers, which are happening in Iowa and North Dakota and a lot of rural places. And the time to do it is before it happens. And we were already seeing 3 cases as reported tonight. So my voice is one of those voices to say, what is our contingency to go to for rapid, fully remote, so that we can get everybody back on the plan that we want to be able to see.
Thank you. Catherine, I couldn't tell if you were trying to jump in or not.
Well, I was just going to, since I wrote something in the chat, I was just going to say it publicly. But I'm Catherine Thibodeau. I'm parent of 3 children at Orono High School. And I wasn't able to attend the entire meeting today, but I just really wanted to thank the school board. And you guys are volunteers and all the staff of RSU 26. I know from my perspective, the communication has been great. Any questions I've had, I think it's a really personal decision for families about whether their children go in person, remote. And my sort of comment was in the chat was that, there isn't a playbook and that it's, and I really appreciate the discussion and the input, the opportunity for input. And, I wish you all the best of luck in your decision making. It's not easy, and I support you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? last chance for public comment. Okay, next board meeting is January 5th, Tuesday at 6 p.m. By Zoom as usual. So we may end up needing an emergency meeting, but may not. We'll just have to play that by ear, but we will announce a meeting with as much advance notice as we can if we, do end up needing it. And so the first executive session is not going to happen. We are now moving to executive session, so I commit that the only things that are going to happen will be motions to go into executive session and to adjourn. So you're welcome to depart. If somebody really wants to wait in the waiting room when we have our executive session, they can do that as well. I would make a motion to go into executive session under 1 MRSA 4056A, discussion of personnel matters. Is there a second?
I second.
Any further discussion? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Leo,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
I also vote aye. We will go ahead and go into public session.